Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of January 16th in the great year of 2026. And my next guest is no stranger to the show. We've had him when we can find him down in Brazil on a number of occasions on the show. The one and only Brian Mier, a longtime Chicago resident and now a longtime resident in Brazil. Hello, Brian.
Hey, thanks for having me, Michael. As a former Heartland Cafe busboy, it's always a pleasure to come on your show.
That's good. I wish I had a great retirement program for you, but we, as you know, we just scraped by for a long time. But we're glad to be here. The show continues. It used to be broadcast from the stage at the Heartland, then it went downtown. Now it's via Zoom from the great 49th Ward in the wonderful city, the greatest city in the world, Chicago, Illinois. And Brian, you are the English reporter for Brazil for TeleSur, or the news service. Tell us a little bit about that TeleSur.
Okay, TeleSur is a 24-hour cable and satellite television news network that was started in 2006 by Hugo Chavez as a socialist alternative to CNN. And it's broadcast in Spanish and English, so I'm the reporter for Brazil for TeleSur English, reporter and television news producer.
And you also have a website, Brazil Wire. Is that yours?
Well, Brazil Wire was a kind of news page that was founded by a guy named Daniel Hunt, and I became its editor, and we did a lot of work for about 7 or 8 years. And then when Lula got elected, we decided we'd been working too hard on it and put it to rest for a little while. But I wrote over 200 articles for it, including 40 just about the United States government's involvement in the Operation Car Wash corruption scandal that resulted in Lula's imprisonment. Political imprisonment, right? So it's still a useful source of information from Brazil from the period of like 2014 to 2023.
Tell us a little bit about what's going on in Brazilian politics. I know the minimal amount of energy I put into following it, that Bolsonaro had been convicted, was going to jail, was trying to get out of jail. What's the latest on the Bolsonaro guy? He's a Trump-like figure for those people who don't know, and a kind of a sycophant for Trump. Not our favorite leader, and he's no longer the leader of Brazil. Fill us in a little bit.
Well, I would say Bolsonaro is even worse than Trump. Nationally, right? Internationally, Trump is the worst. But Bolsonaro was a captain during Brazil's United States-backed neo-fascist military dictatorship, which ran from 1964 to 1985, and there's still a lot of legacy of it today. And when Brazil transitioned back to democratic rule, they gave amnesty for all of the high-ranking military officers, the generals and stuff who had been responsible for the death squads, the torture and repression of like labor union leaders and student activists and things like that. And so when Bolsonaro got elected, he appointed over 2,000 military officers to his government, including big actors from the dictatorship itself in high positions of power. So he had one guy, General Augusto Heleno, who was the aide-de-camp for the leader of the hardline, farthest right-wing faction within the dictatorship that refused to return to civilian rule. And he was actually involved in a coup attempt in 1977. One of the things he did when he was in the dictatorship was they legalized the National University Students Union after outlawing it for 13 years and killing some of its leaders, torturing dozens of its leaders and whatnot. They legalized it. And so they organized their first meeting in 13 years, the National Congress, and he went there with his troops and arrested everybody anyway. 800 people, right? So he was in charge of 17 government agencies, including intelligence, and he was also the UN Minnesota director in Haiti during the Cité Soleil massacre in 2004, when like 100 people were killed in Cité Soleil shantytown, and he was never put on trial for that either. Minnesota was the UN peacekeeping forces. He was the military commander. So luckily, he was arrested too. He's already been released to house arrest, though, because his doctors say he's got Alzheimer's now. He's like 80. But so Bolsonaro was arrested along with several generals who had been involved in the dictatorship. His vice presidential candidate, General Walter Braga Neto, was also a big player during the dictatorship. He was arrested. He's in a military jail right now. And Bolsonaro is being held in a privileged special jail cell in the federal police headquarters. He's got his own room. It's got a TV, but no internet access, private bathroom. A little bit better. It looks kind of like a Motel 6 hotel room or something, like a cheap hotel. But in terms of prison, that's pretty good by Brazilian standards. And there, as you mentioned, there's a move to get him back out of jail.
Can you tell us a little bit about Brazilian politics today? Where are things at? I know we were talking about Bolsonaro, the fascist, and we are happy that Lula is your president. And where is Brazil at on President Trump and the United States?
Okay, well, first of all, although Jair Bolsonaro is in jail, his allies are a strong presence in Congress. The left only has 24% of the seats in Congress. There's 29 parties, 16 are represented in Congress. And so despite all these challenges of not having control of Congress and Senate, Lula has very cleverly managed to push through a lot of very good policies, and this has resulted in 17 million people entering the middle class since he took office. These include annual minimum salary adjustments, raises above inflation level, and strengthening of other social programs and things like that. So what we're dealing with now is that Bolsonaro's in jail. 2026 is an election year. The elections are going to be held in October. And Bolsonaro has designated his son Flavio, who's a senator, also far right, obviously, closely connected to Steve Bannon and Trump and all those people up there, to run in his place. And the polls show that if he runs, it'll go to a second round knockout election. The first round usually has about 10 candidates. They don't have separate primaries by party. It's a totally different system. But it's going to be pretty close. Lula's about 9 points ahead in the polls now. But these far-right candidates, they're very, they have the social media companies on their sides, obviously, as we see with Trump being supported by Elon Musk and Zuckerberg. And these social media companies have a way of really manipulating things through algorithms and all of this crap during the last 2 weeks before the election. In the 2022 elections, Bolsonaro was losing by 6 points 2 weeks before the election, and he ended up only losing by about half a point. So a 9-point lead isn't as comfortable as it looks. So that's the battle on the local front. On the international front, there's this back and forth with Trump, who initially, as you guys probably remember from your coffee prices, imposed a bunch of import tariffs on Brazil, the highest in the world, saying that he'd only lower the tariffs if Lula got Bolsonaro or kept Bolsonaro from going to jail. And so the government just ignored it. Said, of course, we'd like you to remove the tariffs, but we're not going to make exceptions to the rule of law. I'm not going to get involved in the middle of an ongoing court case. I'm not a dictator. And during the time of the tariffs, Brazil's foreign trade actually increased significantly. It opened a bunch of new markets. And in 2025, trade with China hit an all-time high, $171 billion of trade with China. And who got hurt mostly were U.S. consumers. So Lula finally met with Trump, and Lula's a very good negotiator because he came up as a union leader during the dictatorship, having to negotiate with fascist government officials and big business leaders, And he met Lula, and he met Trump, and apparently kind of just charmed Trump. Then Trump ended up saying, "No, I like this guy. He's okay."
It's like with Mondami, for the new mayor of New York.
A similar situation. And so he ended up just getting rid of the tariffs anyway. But the damage to U.S. consumers is still going to be felt because the way that the coffee cycle works, I'm using coffee as an example, but there was beef, there's a lot of different commodities. The way the coffee cycle works, the prices were rising anyway when he imposed the tariffs because there was a drought, a massive climate change drought that affected the harvest in 2024. And so there's this lag time between when the tariffs were put in and when consumers are going to feel the effects. And so that should still be, the prices for coffee in the US should continue to go up for a couple months after the tariffs have ended, which was like a month and a half ago. So I can just only imagine how that pisses off people in the US when the tariffs were in place. Like when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you want is your cup of coffee, and you're like, damn, how much did I pay for this? There's just a dumb move on Trump.
I try to figure that out. I drink a good amount of coffee, and my wife goes to the store, so I don't know what it's even the current price is. Let me ask you another question, though, that follows up from that. What about Brazil and world trade? There's an outfit called BRICS, which would be Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And it's it's up and coming nations, trade. How does that fit up against the United States and the loss of trade with the United States and trading with other countries?
Well, BRICS has been in place for over 15 years now. And a bunch of other countries have joined BRICS. So Iran is in BRICS, Ethiopia is in BRICS, Indonesia is trying to join, Turkey wants to join, United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia have joined, and it's a commerce, it's like a commercial club almost, right? And so what annoys the U.S. the most is they're developing ways. First of all, they started their own development bank, the New Development Bank, often called the BRICS Bank. And it operates like the World Bank, except unlike the World Bank, it doesn't impose neoliberal structural adjustments on countries it's lending money to. The World Bank and the IMF drove dozens of countries in the global South into incredible poverty in the 1980s and 1990s by forcing them to privatize things like their public health system, privatize their education system. One result of IMF meddling was they charge tuition in public schools in South Africa now. And if your parents don't make the payment for your third grade class, that you're pulled out of school until they pay what they owe. And this is even for poor people and stuff. This was because of the IMF. And when the BRICS Bank lends money to countries in the global South for development projects, it says all we care about is that you pay us back. You don't have to change anything in your government or your laws to get this money. So it's a threat to the World Bank. And the idea that they're working on different ways to do trade among themselves without using the dollar is a big threat to the United States, to the dollar. So that's the thing that most bothers Trump. And obviously, it's always bothered the United States when Russia and China start working together. So that, regardless of who's in power, the U.S. governments are always trying to create this kind of rift between China and Russia. And the BRICS strengthens their relationship. And so that's annoying to the Trump administration as well, which is why you see the U.S. will alternately cozy up to Russia and use really aggressive language towards China, or they'll be very aggressive towards Russia and cozy up to China. For the last couple of decades, it seems like the Republicans have been pro-Russia, anti-China more than the Democrats. The Democrats have been more pro-China, anti-Russia. But they're never that favorable of either country. So I think that's the big threat. And then the threat to have other countries involved. It's an alternative to the G7. It's an alternative to NATO and stuff like that. And it's just a threat to Western European and U.S. hegemony in general, which I think is fine.
Brian Mier, let me ask you about Venezuela. As you know, it's been heavy in the news up here. Trump invaded Venezuela, bombed a lot of targets. I noticed that Brazil has sent 40 tons of medical aid to Venezuela after the attack on its health depot, which we have never heard about up here. I got this from other newspapers out of the country. And talk a little bit about Brazil's relationship to Venezuela and what you think the meaning of the Venezuela, the capture of Maduro, hauling him out of the country along with his wife, what this all means and where it's going.
Well, traditionally, the Brazilian Workers' Party has always had a very close relationship with the Bolivarist movement founded by Hugo Chavez and the people of Venezuela. Lula and his administration got in a fight with Maduro in 2024 after the elections. I was there covering the elections. The Venezuelan government suffered a massive cyber attack during those elections, and it screwed up the result tallying. But it was very clear that Maduro mobilized a lot more people to the streets than the opposition did. The idea that the opposition won by 70% is just total disinformation. It looks like Maduro won by 3 or 4%, but Brazil was making these demands on being able to audit the results. The Venezuelan Supreme Court audited the results, and they certified, including its 2 justices that are part of the opposition party, that Maduro was the legitimate winner, but this caused some friction between Brazil and Venezuela. Since the attack, since the United States started getting more aggressive towards Venezuela, the 2 countries have grown closer together. And this 40 tons, basically the U.S. bombed Venezuela's largest hemodialysis center and renal medication distribution warehouse that was meeting the needs for 16,000 dialysis patients across the country. So basically, just like in 2019, when Trump blocked the entry of insulin into the country of Venezuela and 40,000 diabetics died, this is a sadistic move to kill everyone who's on dialysis, basically, in the country. It's like a terror move. So Brazil initially pledged 100 tons of dialysis equipment and medications. 40 tons already arrived. That's what you saw in the news. But 2 days ago, the health ministry upped it to 300 tons. So there's all these planes going into Venezuela right now. As far as the government goes, the U.S., in typical individualist, capitalist, mentality, has been treating the Venezuelan people's movement of the Bolivarian Revolution as if it were a police department or something. Like all you have to do is get rid of the boss, and then everything will fall into place. But it's like a bottoms-up movement, so it doesn't really matter that Maduro's been removed from power. Delcy Rodriguez, who's the vice president, she's really beloved by millions of people in Venezuela, and the CIA and other intel agencies were clearly trying to portray her as if she had betrayed Maduro. First, they sent false rumors that she was hiding in Russia, which was bullshit. Then it's like, she sold out Maduro, which is also bullshit because she refused.
NPR carried that. I heard someone telling me NPR said she was the one that told Trump's troops where he was, where Maduro was sleeping.
No, it's ridiculous because the same time they tried to argue that someone betrayed Maduro, they were also bragging about how they'd been tracking every step he made for the last 3 months, how the CIA had been digitally surveilling him. So make up your minds. Also, 100 people were killed in the attack, including 45 bodyguards. So it wasn't like he just got captured in his sleep. They went in there shooting. And but anyway, she refused to accept the office of president. She said, I'll be the interim president. The real president is Nicolas Maduro. She's spoken to Nicolas Maduro's communicated with her, and it's important to know who she is. Her father is one of the heroes of the Venezuelan left. He's the founder of the Socialist League in the 1970s, and he was tortured to death by CIA operatives and Venezuelan intelligence in 1976. Her and her brother, who's president of Congress, are very close to the Maduro family, especially Maduro's children. It was Maduro's son who nominated Jorge Rodriguez to be the president, the leader of Congress, and they're very inner circle. And so in a way, now I see people in the Democratic Party and Democratic affiliated media trying to say that, oh, well, Trump didn't finish the job. He has to put Maria Corina Machado in the Venezuelan opposition in power. He can't just leave the socialists running the country. Maria Corina Machado has always been very close to Trump. The white Venezuelan middle-class community in Miami are far-right reactionaries, very closely tied to the Cubans and people like Marco Rubio. And her father was an oil billionaire, and she's a close friend of Benjamin Netanyahu. And she doesn't have that much base support in Venezuela. Sure, I mean, the country's divided like the United States, but the far right in Venezuela is really only about 30% of the country. It's not like the US where it's 50-50. So she doesn't have, if they tried to put her in, there'd have to be an invasion. If they had invaded Venezuela, for the last 25 years, the Pentagon has been conducting war game exercises on their supercomputers and simulating wars with Venezuela. And they've lost every time because it would be another Vietnam. Only in Vietnam, the U.S. had access through South Vietnam. South Vietnam had an army.
Brian, if you could talk a little bit about, there's some speculation that a lot of this activity on the part of the U.S. with Venezuela is to really break the back of Cuba, who relies on Venezuelan oil. If you could give us a little bit of info on your sense of that situation, it would be great.
Well, just look at Marco Rubio, right? Marco Rubio. He's one of these Guisanos, the son of. It's so funny to see these super far right-wing white Cubans who say they're sons of Cuban exiles, and then you find out it was Batista who exiled their parents. Ted Cruz is the same way.
They left a few years before.
Yeah, they weren't. His family wasn't kicked out of Cuba by Castro. They fled Batista. So. It's just pure opportunism to pretend that your family suffered because of Castro when they'd moved into Miami long before Castro took power. He's wanted to try and destroy Cuba, like the entire Cuban, not the entire, but let's say 85% of the Cuban community in Florida has wanted to depose Castro since Castro took office. So he's already announced that Cuba's next. But does the U.S. really have enough power to start wars everywhere at the same time? Because now we see they're going towards Iran. They've claimed a big symbolic victory in Venezuela, removing Maduro, but the Socialist Party is still running the country. The best thing for them would be to start exporting more oil to the U.S. Chevron never left Venezuela. Chevron's always been exporting oil. So will they be able to do it? I don't know. Let's see how bogged down the Trump administration starts getting in these other places, trying to start wars and coups with.
Well, Brian, we're going to keep in touch with you so you can keep us up. But before we go, I'd like to go a little bit lighter. And, if you could share a little bit about some highlights of Brazilian culture and Brazilian life. I know they have a great soccer team. I don't know if I've seen any Brazilian movies other than Black Orpheus, which was one of the most beautiful movies I ever saw. Fill us in a little bit.
Well, Michael, there's a Brazil. First of all, I live in Recife. It's Brazil's fourth largest city, but it's had an alternative underground film scene for about 25 years. And the low budget movies they make here just keep getting better and better. And one of them, called The Secret Agent, it just won the Golden Globe for Best Foreign Film. And it's actor Wagner Moura, who a lot of people remember from Narcos. He played Pablo Escobar in Narcos. He won the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor. And it's been nominated for the Oscars. They're going to be at the Oscars. And it's a great film. It's got some like some very creative, dreamlike sequences, but it's about the dictatorship. But it makes connections between the dictatorship in the 70s and what's happening today in countries like the United States and what was happening when Bolsonaro was president in Brazil. So it's very current. And I think the parallels to Trump are what's going to make the people in the Academy want to vote for it. I have a feeling it's going to get at least one Oscar. And, my mom saw it in the U.S. It's showing in the U.S. It's called The Secret Agent. And I just recommend you see it as soon as possible.
I will.
It's fantastic.
What about Brazilian soccer? How does it look for them coming up with the World Cup, et cetera?
I don't have very many high hopes. Brazilian soccer, it's the best country in the world for soccer. It has been for a long time. But for the last 25 years, the European teams have been poaching players when they're younger and younger. So they bring players over to Europe when they're 15, 16 years old, and they forget how to play with the Brazilian style. So now the Brazilian national team, it looks like a bunch of the tactics and the style looks like a bunch of Europeans playing, which means the creativity, which is a strong point of Brazilian soccer, is kind of on the back burner. I think they're going to do okay, but I don't predict they're going to win it this time around in the World Cup. And also, so weird to have a World Cup in the U.S. right now while ICE is deporting people. Would anyone from a foreign country want to go see the World Cup when customs agents are demanding to be able to look through your smartphone and check your social media posts on entry to the United States? If I was not a U.S. citizen, I wouldn't go.
Now Trump, there's certain countries they aren't going to let people in. So they're scrambling,
including Brazil. So what? They shouldn't be allowed to have the cup in the United States this year. I mean, the cup's going to be held in Mexico, the U.S., and Canada. They should just remove the U.S. from it. Except FIFA are massive suck-ups to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
They gave him that peace award, which is ridiculous.
Well, I don't know what's going to happen. So let me ask you one more thing. Expound upon it as much as you like. Any message you have for the people of Brazil, the people of the United States, the people of the world, and what people should be watching for, hoping for, and acting for. How's that?
I think people in the United States should know that everyone in the world is watching how Americans are fighting back against Trump's Gestapo tactics on his own people, like ICE and other things. And people are paying attention.
Well, with that, we're in sync on that, brother. I don't know if I'll ever get to Brazil or not, but it would be a good time to come down there in the winter when it's 90 degrees and it's snowing outside here. If people want to get a hold of you, tell us how we can do that, and tell us how people can find TeleSur so they can look at it on their computer.
Well, TeleSur broadcasts its stream on YouTube. You can watch it live on YouTube. TeleSur English and TeleSur Spanish. TeleSur Spanish is a much bigger network if you speak Spanish. But they're both on YouTube. My Twitter, or X, I should say, is Brian M. TeleSur. And I have a blog on Substack called D-Link in Brazil.
What is that again? D-Link?
D-Link in Brazil. D-Link in Brazil.
I got it. All right.
Lincoln is a Marxist concept created by Samir Amin, the great Egyptian Marxist political economist.
Well, I got a lot to learn from you, young fella, and I really appreciate you joining us and talking. We're thousands and thousands of miles away. I love how the technology at least lets us do this and bring some stuff that's going on to light. And we'll have you back, everybody else.